Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast is number 1383. The topic is Q&A and the title is My Biggest Mistakes with Nutrition. So I had a client actually ask me that question recently. What were some of the biggest mistakes you made with nutrition? We've been talking back and forth. They're newish to kind of tracking their nutrition. They had thought that they could just train their butt off and the training is what drove results. They didn't realize that the nutrition is kind of like the material the results are made from. So if they want to build muscle tissue, you have to have protein to be converted into new muscle tissue, and you have to have enough calories like carbs and fats coming in to fuel the energy aspects of that process. So they had been training and kind of inconsistently eating. They would have said that they were eating a lot, they were eating enough to grow, but whenever we started tracking their data, they realized it was kind of scattered and a little all over the place, and they weren't as consistent as they thought. So the numbers and values that they should have been to build muscle tissue for calories and protein, they were actually only hitting that like 3 or 4 days a week out of 2 weeks. So that was not good. So we realized, okay, what they had thought they were doing was not actually what they were doing. So we wanted to refine that. They then expressed that they were freaking just angry at themselves. They're mad. And they're mad because they, hadn't looked into it. They knew that they could have looked into it, but they didn't want to look into it because they were stressed with work and other responsibilities, and they didn't want to know how bad they were doing. They just wanted to kind of live in la la land and hope that it was going to work out okay. So they're just angry at themselves. So we were talking through that and just talking about they wanted to know basically if other people screw up too. And rather than telling other clients' stories, I figured I'd tell my own because that was a nicer thing to do. But some of the mistakes I made, I thought would be just kind of fun to share as a podcast. Now, I have changed my body shape and size a lot. So people who knew me, grew up with me, I was 165 pounds. I'm 6 foot tall now. But when I graduated high school, I was 165 pounds. I'm now 283, so almost 120 pounds more. And at 165 pounds in high school, I had fat rolls. Like I had no veins, no visible veins anywhere. And you could grab like a thick roll of fat around my midsection. So 6 foot tall, I might have been like 135, 145 if I was lean. I think 145 is generous to myself. So probably more like 135. I would have been very, very, very thin because I didn't have a lot of muscle tissue. But I had a lot of fat on me. Now at 283, you can see kind of the edges of my abs. And like a friend of mine used to call his abs fabs. He said they're fabulous, and they're fat abs, basically. He can see them, but he still feels like he's fat. So that's kind of where I'm at now. So I've gained 120 pounds, but I'm significantly leaner. Now, it has taken me, I'm 38, so it's been 20 years, and I actually started before I was 18. I started lifting weights at 16, and I started exercising and kind of paying attention to my physique at 15. So it's been 23 years, so I've gained 120 pounds. I look like a completely different person. I'm significantly leaner, but it's been a long journey. And the first half of that journey was an unbelievable waste of time in regards to results, but it was unbelievably invaluable in regards to education and motivation. And then also just the willpower that I developed and all these other skills and habits like dedication and other aspects that I absolutely use today that I would not have developed as well, kind of if I didn't have those early years. So I'm thankful for the lessons I learned from them. I wish, I could have learned, I wish I could have learned those lessons and got better results, but I'm still happy for the time because there was something that I could take away from it. As I was talking to a different client, I said, if the only thing you get from it is that you hated that and you don't want to go back to it, that's already invaluable. Having that motivation of saying, I remember what that was like. I don't want that anymore. So now when I'm supposed to eat this food, but I don't really feel like it, when I'm supposed to train, but I don't really feel like it, I can remember what that was and be like, oh, hell, I ain't going back there. So I was telling him that there's a lot to be learned from what we might think were mistakes or what we think were wasted years or wasted time. There's still a lot of value in there when you fish around and look for it. Now, when it comes to what were my biggest mistakes, I pretty much have made every single mistake any client I've ever worked with has made. So I've learned kind of like as I got through my early 20s. Like in my early 20s, I was pretty aggressive. Never mean. I hope I've never been mean to a client. I don't believe I have, but I hope that I haven't been. But when I was younger, somebody's like, well, I don't have time to eat. And I'm like, well, damn it, make time. Like, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, you said you wanted this, make the damn time. You don't get up till, 6:30, get up at 6:15. You fall asleep on the couch at 9:30, stay up till 9:45, get a damn protein shake in you. So I was very kind of matter of fact as to what would need to be done. And I feel like nowadays I'm a little more compassionate, which I'm sure that there are clients I have that are like, their jaw just hit the floor that I think that I'm compassionate. But I do think I'm a nice person at times. But okay, this is getting side-railed. But the idea is I have made every mistake under the sun. So don't ever feel like, if you work with any coach, whether it's me or somebody else, I promise you that they made a ton of mistakes. We're all human beings. We all make mistakes. We all go through a learning process where you try something because you think it's a good idea. You do it, and then you go, oh, crap, that was not a good idea. But you learn from it. So any trainer, anyone who coaches people, they're in a position where they know like what they're coaching. They have been through mistakes as well. So you do not have to be perfect to be successful. You just have to keep trying and learn from your mistakes. Now, some of the mistakes I made, one of them is just under-eating for fat loss. So when I was trying to lose fat, I would under-eat. Now, when I was younger, when I first started at 15 years old, from about 15 to about 17 and a half, I didn't eat. I tried my best to not eat. I didn't understand food at that time, and I thought that just, like, I learned about I knew of calories, but I didn't really pay attention to them until I was 15, and then I kind of thought, well, if I'm eating, when they say, like, if you overeat, you get fat. Well, the less I eat, the more fat I can lose. That was kind of my thinking at that time, which obviously is not true, but that was my thinking at the time. So I'm like, well, I'll just eat nothing. And I was fueled by self-hate. I've always been pretty stubborn. I got a double dose from that from my parents. But so I was like, fine, I just won't eat. And to me, that is a decision I make, and then I'm done. So I made the decision. That's my decision. And I'm done with it. I don't have to question that anymore. I don't argue with myself anymore. I made the choice. I'm done. So from 15 to like 17 and a half, I literally only ate like one meal a day, and that was typically dinner in front of my parents, so that way they would see me eating. But I would, kind of fumble around with breakfast or wake up too late to eat breakfast. At school, I would just kind of push some food around my plate. I'd often, maybe take one or two bites to be social with people, but I'd throw most of my food away. And then I would try to guesstimate how many calories I had throughout the day, and then at night, I would try to exercise that many calories off. Now, I didn't know. There was no internet at that time, and I only had magazines like once a month to learn from, so I didn't really know how many calories the exercise was burning. But I knew, like, okay, if I ate a lot that day, like more than I wanted, I'd have to punish myself harder with weight training. If I didn't eat that much, maybe I could just do some arms and, have fun doing that. But if it was a bad day, then I had to do some squats and some horrible, miserable things that I hate as a punishment, self-punishment. So I basically ate nothing, and I ended up growing 4 inches over that time span. So I went from 5'8" to 6 foot tall, but I weighed the exact same. So I stayed at 165 from 15 to like 17, 18 years old. And so I grew 4 inches, didn't gain any amount of weight, but I didn't look any leaner either. I still had like fat rolls. So I was basically just exercising off muscle tissue every night rather than actually burning body fat. Because I ate so little amount of calories, my body deemed that the body fat was necessary as protection for my organs. So it would rather burn off muscle tissue and not replace it, because I didn't give it any protein to replace it with anyhow. So I was just damaging muscle tissue and then giving it no material to replace and grow with. So I actually, for 2.5 years, tore muscle off of my body. I actually work with people now to decrease muscle tissue in specific body parts. Sometimes it's models, and then kind of the more common one is post-college sport females. So if a female did a sport and she kind of grew like maybe thick thighs, maybe they did softball, and she had kind of like thicker legs, and there isn't like professional baseball for females. So once she was done with college, it's like, okay, well, I'm glad I had a body that I had for my sport, but I don't like this body now. I want to lose muscle off my legs. I want to get kind of more balanced upper and lower body. So we would actually go through a protocol to take muscle tissue off their lower body. The protocol that I use is very similar to what I was accidentally doing when I was at 15 to 17 years old. So I was actively stripping muscle off of my body. Very frustrating. Unbelievably frustrating now, because I basically just took 2.5 years to get further behind, and my genetics weren't great to start with. So that was very frustrating. But I learned from it. Then I did do it again, like at around 18 years old, I realized I wanted to go to college, and I was like, well, I've been starving myself for 2.5 years. I've been training like a maniac, and I just look skinny fat. I was like, well, I might as well eat food, and maybe I can build muscle tissue, because I started learning more over those 3 years. We got internet in my house, so I was able to download In the Iron Asylum off RX Muscle. They had basically interviews with bodybuilders, and I would hear them talking about eating food all the time, like chicken and rice, chicken and rice, chicken and rice. Oats, I hate oats. I hate drinking oats. It's disgusting. You don't know whether to chew or to swallow. It's not even a consistency that's normal. So chicken and rice it was, and I decided to drink a gallon of milk a day. I had read an article from Lee Priest. It was in Muscular Development magazine, and he was talking about how he got jacked when he was younger. He ate a whole chicken, a loaf of bread, and drank a gallon of milk a day. Well, I couldn't get the chicken and loaf of bread, but I was like, I'll get the gallon of milk, because I came from 2.5 years of not eating, so I didn't really have the hunger to eat. I basically killed my brain's sensation of hunger. So I just don't really get hungry now. Like, I just know I'm supposed to eat, so I eat, but I don't really get hungry for anything. So at that time, trying to eat like a whole loaf of bread and eat a chicken was just an annoying, horrible process. But I was like, I can drink some calories. So I drank a gallon of milk a day for 2 years. I didn't miss a single day for 2 years. I went from 165 up to 195, and I believe all 30 pounds was fat. It was just pure lard, just fat. So that stuck me basically. I was bigger in a t-shirt, but I was just like, in my mind, I hated the way I looked without a shirt on. So I never took a shirt off for anything, ever. So if I ever went to the pool, it was with a shirt on. If I ever went anywhere in the summer on the beach, I always had a shirt on. I just hated the way my body looked. So at that time, I was getting into 2021, and I had learned even more. I was going to undergrad for health and phys ed, so I was learning more and more about nutrition. They don't really teach you great stuff about nutrition in school, about that kind of stuff. Certainly not aesthetic and fat loss nutrition, just more so blood work, like how to control diabetes and blood sugar and things. So I went back into extreme dieting in my early 20s. And it was because I knew how to do it for my clients. I had helped clients get super lean, but I always thought that I needed extra punishment because, I was a piece of crap. My genetics were horrible, and, you just hate on yourself so bad. So I only ate 1,500 calories a day. I lifted for an hour and a half every day and ran a mile every day. And I remember one diet I did, I lost 30 pounds, but I looked worse. Somehow I looked fatter. 30 pounds less than I did, 30 pounds heavier. And I was like, good Lord, what the hell, So I have learned that was one of the mistakes I made, was just under eating for fat loss. The other end was overeating for muscle gains. I've went through phases where I was trying to, pack on a ton of size, so I'd eat an entire box of cereal as a pre-workout. I'd order a Domino's pizza as my post-workout, kept drinking that gallon of milk a day. I'd gain weight, but most of it was fat. So over the course of 12 weeks, 3 months, I'd gain 20 pounds. But I didn't see really any muscle definition. I just felt like a fat marshmallow, basically, a big puffy marshmallow. At one point in time, I have been as heavy as 295 pounds with 19.5-inch arms, but I didn't like the way I looked. I didn't have a belly over my pants. When I sat down, there was no, rolls. It was just a big, swollen, puffy marshmallow. And I didn't like that look either, but I was like, well, damn, at least I look good in a shirt. At least people would say, holy hell, that dude's big. So you'd get comments and things, but I didn't like the way I looked at 295. Just big puffy face, double chin. You'd have more chins, but you're so swollen, your chin only folds one time. So that whole look, it's lovely. But I have made all of those mistakes. So I've made every mistake of undereating. I've made every mistake of overeating. So what have I learned through my mistakes? That would be kind of the better takeaway. So it's good to hear that I've screwed up everything, so that way in case you screw up something, you know you're not alone. But it's also helpful to hear what I learned from my mistakes, so you can learn from my mistakes rather than having to continue to make your own. One of the things I learned that is 100% like a standby that I live by is eat as early in the day as possible. I try to eat as many calories as I can as early in my day as possible, and then I taper off my calories throughout the rest of the day. That has allowed me to stay big, but also stay lean. So I'm 283 pounds now with like edges of abs, and I 100% believe that the fact that I try to eat as many calories as possible as early in the day as possible and then taper off helps that. It allows me to make sure I don't lose muscle tissue all day by being underfed, even while I'm active and moving around. I have the muscle damage from the day before, like the workout of the day before. My body's trying to grow muscle like all the next day. So I'm eating all these calories, all this protein, so all damn day, I'm not falling further behind, I'm actually making progress. I'm building muscle tissue. Then as I taper off throughout the rest of the day, my body tends, like it'll burn off whatever excess, quote unquote, of carbs and fats I ate for that day. And then all of a sudden I end the day, I've had a bunch of muscle being built all day. I end the day with no real leftovers of carbs and fats. So you go to bed, your body has to burn through a little bit of carbs and fats throughout the night, helps keep you lean. And then the next day you start it all over again. So eating early in the day is by far one of the most impactful things that I believe for my physique. Now I have clients do that all the time, as much as they can manage within their schedule and their, kind of switching from whatever their current habits are now. You can't, you have to learn to crawl before you can walk and walk before you can run, kind of thing. So I do that. I eat as early as I can, as much calories as I can, and then I taper off the rest of the day. Then, when I want to lose body fat, I increase my training volume first. I actually don't adjust anything with my food. I add in like circuits, supersets, drop sets. I might, add in what's called a trailing superset, where if I'm doing back that day, maybe I'll do back rows and a couple, like a set of calf raises. Then I'll go over to like lat pull downs. I'll do a couple sets of lat pull downs with calf raises in between that. And then I'll do like, dumbbell rows, and I'll do a couple sets of calf raises in between that. So I just take some kind of body part and do a set of that in between sets of everything else. So I just never stop moving basically the entire workout. And that helps a lot for focus, so that we don't get lost in social media and answering text messages and emails. But it also just helps me burn a lot more calories in my just activity for the day. So not just exercise calories, but just your up and active and doing things calories. That helps me burn a lot. And then if I do reduce calories, I don't reduce by much. I might just clean up the food I eat at the end of the day, maybe reduce carbohydrates and fats towards the end of the day and have more like protein-dense foods. So I just might pull my carbs and fats out earlier in the day than I would typically. My calories almost never drop below body weight times 13 to 15, somewhere in that range. Now that for me is a really good range because I'm pretty active. If I sit down for more than like 10 minutes, I fall asleep. So I am very active. I'm up and moving. I'm always doing things. It's exhausting. But that's just kind of the way I've learned to live. I don't sit much. Even when I sit for like doing computer work and stuff, I'm always shaking my leg or doing something, so I'm always rattling the table. Sometimes my wife's like, are you shaking? And I'm like, oh yeah, sorry. So, but I just move a lot. And I have a lot of muscle mass to move around. So at 283, I burn through a lot of calories just walking around and moving around. So that allows me to still eat a lot. So when I want to lose body fat, I pull out my carbs and fats earlier in the day than I normally would. I increase the activity in my training. But that like pulling out the carbs and fats is kind of really the only kind of calorie reduction that I do. I usually stay between body weight to 13, like body weight times 13 to 15, somewhere in there. Now, when I want to gain weight, I have a bigger meal before bed, so I don't pull out the carbs and fats as much. I'll have like steak and rice right before I go to bed. I'll even add in like an extra protein shake during the day just to make sure I have a surplus of protein floating around. I slow down my training. I cut out anything that's kind of aerobic based, and I cut out my intensity techniques like drop sets and stuff. I focus on just super isolative, very damaging, muscle damaging things. I try not to do a lot of super busy things. I just kind of basically you hit a hard set of like 10 to 12, take 2-minute rest, hit a hard set of 10 to 12, take 2-minute rest. So it's really boring training. It's not the way I love to train, but it works. So what I've learned is, in a sense, that small changes have a big difference if you're consistent. You have to track what you're doing. You have to actually know where you're at. So one of the things, I laugh because there was a gym teacher I had when I was in high school, and he would always, if you're doing something dumb, he would ask, he goes, "What are you doing?" And you're like, "Oh, well, like, I thought that maybe," and he cut you off and he goes, "That's your problem. You're thinking. What are you doing thinking? You just need to do what I tell you." So you could tell that he was our favorite teacher. But whenever I ask somebody, I'm like, "Well, what's your calories?" And the answer is, "Well, I think they're at," and I'm like, "Oh, nope." No, I don't cut them off because I don't want to be a jerk like my teacher was. But the second somebody says, "Well, I think," and you can tell they're looking like up and to the left, trying to like see if the number's magically up in the ceiling. They're just trying to like put together where they think they're at. And it's like, no, you got to know where you're at. Track what you're doing. It doesn't take that much effort once you learn how to do it. It might take 5 minutes a day. That's it. It's important enough for you, you'll find 5 minutes. Now, sometimes you miss a day, here and there. Like, you don't have to be perfect. But for the most part, tracking yourself isn't that miserable. It's not that impossible to do. Just got to learn it and get used to it. So you take some time every day to brush your teeth. You take some time to shower. You take some time to do all these other things. You add 3 minutes or 5 minutes into tracking your food. It's not the end of the world. So you got to know where you're at so that way you're consistent. You're going to think nice things about yourself. Everybody thinks they do better than what their reality is, because we have a rationale, a reason, an excuse for everything we do that isn't right, that we don't really like kind of log those things as like mistakes or as like bad things. Somebody's like, if you were supposed to, like, let's say for example you're out and about and you're walking around and you're like, "Oh, I'm freaking thirsty, I'm kind of hot and tired, I'm going to drink a soda." Well, that's 60 grams of sugar you sure as hell probably didn't need, but you would say like, "Well, I was really thirsty and I was moving around a lot, so, that's totally fine." But you don't know the numbers. You don't know what effect that had on your day. So you just kind of you kind of brush that off. And if somebody's like, "Well, how's your diet going?" You're going, "Oh, it's good. It's great." And you wouldn't bother thinking like, "Well, yeah, I'm following parts of it, but I'm adding some foods here and there and I'm missing some foods here and there." We tend to like kind of gloss over those details. So track what you're doing, know where you're at, and then I don't expect anything to happen until I'm months in. So my typical goals are 12 to 20 weeks. Now, if I have something coming up like a beach vacation in 8 weeks, well, then I'll do the best I can in 8 weeks. I should have started more than 8 weeks ago, but if I only found out about it now and I only have 8 weeks, then that's all I got. So I'll work with it. But in general, I don't expect things to happen any like super duper fast, because I have a million other things I got to do in my life too. So I'm often doing, like degrees of what I should do, not exactly 100% of it. So 12 to 20 weeks is a typical goal time for me. I don't worry. Like, I do what I'm supposed to do, and I track what I'm doing. But if I don't see any results in the first 2 to 4 weeks, I don't think too much about it anymore. I just kind of wait and give it time. And then all of a sudden it starts to kind of like snowball effect. It builds and builds and builds. And then the back half of the progress seems to go a lot faster. It's happening at all times. You just don't see as many details. For example, if you're losing body fat, you don't get to see muscle details until you get down to a certain amount of fat. So if I have two inches of fat over my muscle, I'm not going to see anything, whether it's 2 inches or a half inch. So the first inch and a half, you don't see nothing, but it's happening. You're losing an inch and a half. But then when you only have a half inch left, man, when you get down to like a quarter of an inch, boom, you get to really see some lines. Quarter inch to an eighth inch, you're like, holy crap, what the hell? So you get to see these big effects from just a quarter inch change, but you didn't see anything happen in the first inch and a half. So there's still stuff happening at the beginning. You just don't get to see it. Cool. Okay, well, that's pretty much kind of all the mistakes I made, what I've learned. The big takeaway is just that calories and protein matter the most. I talk about this all the time. We have podcast 1232, nutrition podcast titled Start Here, that kind of explains what the most important things is and where you should start if you want to make changes nutritionally. But calories and protein matter the most. Even if I have to eat weird food, I'll do whatever I have to do to maintain my calories and my protein. They drive results. The rest of the details, whether you eat, brown rice versus white rice, whether you eat steak versus chicken, they can clear up some quality aspects, maybe digestion, ease of digestion. But calories and protein drive movement towards your goal. The rest of it is just kind of some small details about the quality of the movement. But really, nothing happens if your calories and protein aren't tracked and consistent. So that's definitely the best place to focus. Okay, I hope this was helpful. I have no clue. I hope it was. I appreciate everybody listening, and I hope they always get something good from these podcasts. So thank you to the client who asked this question. I hope this is helpful and gave you some good insight. You're not alone. Everybody makes mistakes. Just learn from them, keep moving, and the lessons you learn are an investment into your future so you can make even faster and faster results. So it's pretty exciting. So get fired up, crush what you're doing now, because you're going to get better and better results from it. Cool. Well, if you like today's podcast or the podcast in general, please share the podcast. The more people you share it with, the more people can help. You can share it on social media. You can share it in a conversation with a friend. However you share it, thank you for sharing it. Thank you to the patrons of the podcast, people who financially support the podcast. The podcast costs over $1,000 a year, well over $1,000, to do hosting costs and all that stuff. I give an hour to it every day, and we want to keep it for free, no ads, none of that stuff. I'd love to keep it for free. So I appreciate everybody who participates with financial donations. It really helps. It really, really, really makes a difference. You can consider donating if you want to. You can go to our website, www.brutalirongym.com, and you can do a one-time donation, monthly donation, yearly donation, whatever you do. I appreciate that you do it. We all appreciate it, so we can keep this going. If you like the information we share in our podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. If you have any questions, feedback, suggestions, anything you want to know, let us know at our email at brutalirongym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.